Sheera Frenkel, thanks for talking to us. In Australia, we had an experience earlier this year of watching how Facebook could act as a real bully boy when it blocked all the news platforms because the government was threatening a legal code it didn't like. Your book suggests these tactics have been a feature of the company from day one.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Facebook has very specific patterns that repeat again and again. I mean, that's one of the things we sort of show in our reporting in this book. And bullying, that very aggressive, sort of ruthless approach in business, is something that Mark Zuckerberg started when he was still a high school student, really. And whether that meant winning a game of chess or a board game, or whether that meant establishing the world's first social media company, Mark Zuckerberg is an incredibly ruthless and aggressive business person.
Sheera Frenkel, there are conflicting public images of Mark Zuckerberg, the ruthless side, the other just a sort of geeky nerd for whom success was all a big surprise. But you argue his ambitions were really clear from day one.
Yes, and I'd argue people to see past some of that persona. I think that it was quite useful for him when he was first founding his company to be seen as a bumbling 20-something nerd from Harvard. And, his mistakes were, oopsie, I made a mistake and I'm sorry. And if you even read some of his early apologies, they have that kind of schoolboy flavor to them. He knows what he's doing. He's very, very strategic. And I think one of the things we document in this book, in chapter after chapter, really, is that he is ultimately the one that is making decisions at Facebook. He is the one that has the final call on these things. And so I think the public and governments all over the world have to really hold him to account.
Well, the book focuses particularly on the 5 years from the 2016 US election to the 2020 campaign. So let's have a look at the interaction particularly between Facebook and Donald Trump. You argue that Facebook really wasn't ready for a candidate like Trump.
It's fascinating because while Trump is one of their most important users, he had, before he was banned, nearly 30 million Facebook followers. He was also their most problematic. He tested Facebook's norms and standards every single day. He created rifts between different parts of the company, including, as our reporting shows, between Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. And he forced them to confront all of the problems of their platform in a single individual. Trump is not the first global leader to do so, but when it was done here on American soil and an American company was being used, it really forced a sort of public reckoning of what are you doing? What is your policy? Are you going to allow elected leaders to say anything they want to say in the name of free speech? Or are you going to acknowledge, we quote someone who quite wisely says that freedom of speech is not freedom of reach.
Well, the experience with Trump really forced US lawmakers to focus on the role of Facebook, didn't it?
Well, it forced them to make a number of ad hoc decisions that they've honestly struggled to defend in the years since then. With Trump specifically, all they've really succeeded in doing is kicking the can down the road by a couple years. The ban against Trump expires in 2 years. At that point, it'll be 2022. That is, perfect timing for Trump to come back online just ahead of the 2024 presidential elections. Are we going to just repeat all of this over again in 2 years?
But nothing much really has changed at the end of the day. So as you say, we could be facing exactly the same situation in 2024.
It's the one thing that seems to have united Democrats and Republicans here in the United States. And so there is hope that at one point they will get it together to figure out how to update some of the laws and norms and standards of this country to address social media companies like Facebook. We don't think that'll happen quickly. It's likely to be very, very slow moving. But there is progress. There is energy being focused in that direction.
So is Facebook unstoppable or unchangeable? You say it certainly won't be changing from within.
Well, I would say that as long as Mark Zuckerberg is at the helm of the company, I don't see much chance of change. If anything, in the last 2 years, we've seen the core group of executives that surround Mark Zuckerberg become even smaller and more entrenched. These are people that have been at the company since the very beginning. Anyone that did come out from the outside that was a voice of dissent has largely been driven out. And so, no, I don't think people are very hopeful for change from within. I think the hope is change from outside. And one thing we really hoped for in writing this book was to educate people about the mistakes of this company, the problems writ large with social media. People know that sugar is not good for them. They're not going to do away with it entirely. And to start thinking of it that way, to start thinking of something in limited qualities, to understand its dangers even while we accept its role in our lives, we think that alone would be progress.
Well, it's a fascinating insight, Sheera Frenkel. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
In a statement, Facebook described the book as, quote, a rehash of history that relies on anecdotes by mostly unnamed critics. You can find the full statement on our website.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.